Welcome to another episode of Stories of Awakening podcast, where we talk about people's stories of discovery and growth, from overcoming addiction and trauma to finding inner peace and purpose. Today, I have with me a friend, Elden Brooks, that will share his story of awakening and transformation with us. So welcome, Elden. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Valen. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So I know you through a friend in common, and when I heard your story, I said that I would love to invite you on the podcast because I really feel that stories are so powerful and we can learn so much from them. I definitely learn a lot from them, and I'm sure people can really learn a lot from your story. So whenever you feel ready, you can tell us your story. Start from whenever you feel is right. We will listen.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And it's my story. It's a very personal story, obviously, but I share it because I do think that there's potentially some value in it for someone that may hear it. And that motivates me to try and understand it and to be able to articulate it and to share it on platforms and in ways that can get to people that maybe it can mean something to. So, the Awakening podcast, I've listened to a few episodes here that you do and have thought about what it means to awaken. And if I think about like states of consciousness, my sleeping state is a very different frame of reference than my waking state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's waking states. There's even a spectrum among the waking states that vary. I could be really tired. I could be really hungry. I could be really focused on something, or I could be, just lost in some form of entertainment or something that I'm enjoying. And I think the starkness, what we call waking up from that sleep state to the waking state, that starkness is because there's so much that's different. And similar to that, when I think about waking up in like a midlife of where I'm at now, it really is relative. It really is because of the distance I've come, or because of the magnitude of the change of the constituent parts of a life, or of my kind of experience in the world, from where I was to where I am. So I think waking up is an apt metaphor just because so much changed in a short amount of time. But really, it was all kind of building. It begins even before it begins, so to speak. So I don't know exactly where to start it, but I'll just start by talking a little bit about where I was, kind of where I came up, how I came up, the religion that was a big part of my life, and then changes that happened in my midlife that have put me on a different course, that have caused me to feel like it's an awakening. So we awake every day to a new day, and we have a lot of those. If we're lucky, I think it's possible to wake up in a life, and more than once. And I think we do it throughout childhood, and we do it throughout other times. So this is just kind of my story of that. But I was born and raised in the Southwest of the U.S. in the dry climate, and I was raised among 4 brothers. Bless my mom's heart, raising 5 boys. And we were raised in a particular religion that is Mormonism, at least the largest branch of Mormonism. And we were very faithful to that. And my dad was converted to Mormonism in his mid-30s. He had 3 boys at the time and was searching for answers in his life. He came across some missionaries. The Mormon church is very active in sending out the word, sending out their message, and trying to convert. And my dad connected with what was being shared and felt like it was the right thing to do for his family, and was baptized, joined the church, and then raised his 3 boys that were already here they got baptized, and then I was born and my younger brother came along. So I'm second to youngest. And so we were all kind of raised in that system of Mormonism, which is a system of strong community, a system of strong faith, and a belief system that kind of permeates so many aspects of one's life, from the blessing of a child for certain things to happen in their life, even when they're just a couple of weeks old, pronouncing that and sharing that kind of publicly, and inserting that into the milieu of a child's life, even though they're only a couple of weeks old, and the possibilities are endless, to baptizing them at 8, which is a full commitment to follow this doctrine and this teaching as an 8-year-old, to for the young men going on missions that are 2 years in their late teen years, like 19 to 20 or 21. And young women can do those missions as well. But where I came up, there was a particular emphasis and kind of an expectation that one would do that. And so I did all those things and kind of checked all those milestone boxes, received all of those ordinances that they teach are required for eternal life. And I had a lot of happiness. And I look back at my childhood, it was full of happiness. I got to live in places that allowed me a lot of freedom. My parents worked a lot. They were gone out of the home a lot, which just meant it was mostly me and my brothers and friends. And I look back at a childhood that was really full of adventure, full of wonder, full of exciting things happening. And I really wouldn't change any of that. And the belief system just created this like nest of warmth, security, kind of hope. It created all of this value for me. I was very committed to it in my early teenage years. I mean, even 10, 11 preteen years, I was reading the scriptures of the church for myself. I was making discoveries for myself about trying to connect what I was reading in the books to what was happening in my reality, to my life. I felt like I had that guiding hand of God, and it felt very just all so connected. And I went on a mission and served in the Northwest, in the rainy part of the Northwest and of the U.S. And on my mission, I made some connections that post-mission, so at this point I'm 21, almost 22, I get a job right after coming home in the financial services industry and start working. Start working with money, and learned a lot through that experience. Had some good mentors, and kind of that laid for me this path of, hey, I'm going to be successful in life. I'm going to have resources, and believe very strongly that I could kind of fit that role of a financial services person. And I did for about 16 years before kind of large changes came my way. And I'm in the midst of those. So I'll get to there. Don't want to get too far ahead. So the thing about the Mormon church that was starting to happen for me was that I could learn things outside in the world about world history or about other world religions. And there would be some part of the church teaching, the church doctrine that I came up with, that I could find, that I could study, that I could come across, that would basically create this kind of inner tension. Very good examples would be being taught the creation of the earth was a 7-day process. And it was when I was younger, it was literally 7 days of how it was discussed and taught. And that might be different in different places in Mormonism. I've met other people who grew up in different places where it wasn't as literal there. So there is a kind of a spectrum of that. But for me, these tensions of like, I'm learning this and it doesn't quite align with what this doctrine is. And it's causing me kind of unease or distress to try and reconcile it from within that view of a believing person. And it's almost like it limited my frame of reference through just this narrow, like I say, I had to look at everything through the eye of this particular needle.
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually, once I got out of that system, it was like I could hold the needle and I could see everything, and the needle was just in the midst of everything, kind of as to make an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So the story goes where I get married. I find my best friend who I marry after my mission while I'm going to school, and we have a child together. We move from Utah, actually, where we had met and where we were starting out. We moved to here to the Northwest, where I live in Washington State. And now I'm in the rainy climate again, same place I served my mission. So I go from the dry to the wet, and I love it here. I've learned to love it here. It's a great place. But I continue in this career of financial services, and I'm seeing a lot of success. And my wife is able to stay home and take care of kids. We have 3 children. So this whole thing starts to, for me, become really complicated when I developed these autoimmune diseases. So in my mid-30s, started to develop some illnesses that changed my life. And one of those in particular prevented me from really getting outside much, or doing much of anything that really made life enjoyable. And in the decade and a half before that, I was really an outdoorsy person, very much wanting to be in the physical space, road biking for a long time, rock climbing for a long time, and really pushing myself in some of those spaces of endurance and in temperatures and in kind of conditions and all of that stuff. But I got from this autoimmune disease, I got into a place where I became extremely limited with that. And it was like I basically had to be in an air-conditioned room pretty much still, and pretty much not getting emotional about anything in order to be comfortable, because getting anything outside of that would create these terrible, painful symptoms that I would experience. And so that was coming on right in 2019. Between 2018 to the beginning of 2020 was when all of these kind of symptoms started coming on. And in 2020, when the pandemic began, there's a lot of pain from the pandemic. There's still a lot of damage, I think, that's being told. There's also a lot of good that is yet to kind of be revealed or emerged. I'm reminded of Isaac Newton, who actually, if I've got the story right, he was at university. He was studying when there was a pandemic that he had to go home for. And it was during the time he was at home studying in his parents' farmhouse that he wrote the manuscripts, or that he really started piecing together the math for what would become Newtonian physics today, which are, the math that got us to the moon. So I'm always reminded that in the darkest times of a pandemic, something like a Newton could emerge out, and a breakthrough in our science and our advancements could always come from something like that. I think there's universal laws that allow for that in terms of correspondence and kind of an elasticity to what the chaos and the order and how they interplay. So the pandemic for me, and I speak carefully about this because I know for so many it was painful, and and it's ongoing, and there's loss, tremendous loss of life and of richness of life. But for me, it was a godsend. It was exactly what I needed at the time, because just going into the office, trying to function in my career was becoming untenable with the symptoms I would feel. And with what my body was doing. So working from home was a godsend for me. It allowed me to be in control of kind of the ambient air temperature and where I was and all of this stuff. So it was also around that time that this disease really prevented me from sleeping well. I would only get a couple of hours, if I was lucky, of sleep a night. And with the rest of my time at night, I started listening to audiobooks. I found that if I just stayed quiet and rested my body and left the lights off and just basically pretended I was asleep, everything except my mind, that I could get enough rest to be able to function the next day. Kind of, even if the battery wasn't fully charged, it was enough. And I think over time it was not going to be enough, but I was at least making it work. But it allowed me to delve into a number of books, audiobooks, and learn things. And I was interested in physics, in gravity, in history, in Native American history, in ancient religions, in philosophy. Just began to consuming all of this information. And I was finding that the more I was learning, the more I was looking through that eye of that needle about everything, that I was approaching everything with this bias of it's got to fit into this narrative that I've been given of why I'm here and what this earth is and who God is. And it all has to fit through that. And so I'm just kind of cramming all this information through that needle. And it's creating such a tension in me of feeling like maybe I've got to address that. Maybe I've got to ask some hard questions. And at the same time, I've lost in a lot of ways my physical self, because I can't express myself through the climbing, through the cycling, through the things that I would do outdoors. I can barely even play with my own children, wrestling on the floor, whatever, as I would normally do as a dad, jumping on the trampoline or going on walks through the park. I could not do those things. My wife was doing so much of that kind of parenting because I couldn't do that for them during that time. That was particularly hard. I would even get symptoms if I got emotional. So I couldn't get too emotional about anything. It was basically compressing me into this sliver of what a life that I had before was in the physical realm. And yet the inside of my awareness, my consciousness, my engagement with reality and kind of how I interpret it, that felt like it was expanding in just as much of a magnitude, but in the other direction. The expansion of my mind contrasted the compression of my physical body. And I think that I was also at a point, there's these spontaneous spiritual awakenings that people have experienced. And the ancient Hindus talk about a Kundalini energy that rests at the base of the spine and then moves upward at a period where someone becomes fully conscious or fully aware, fully awakened. And I think I was beginning to experience some of those things, although I wasn't having the physical manifestations of them, but it was very much inside, making new connections. And it was the more I could move that needle away from my eye and stop looking through it, stop restricting myself through that, the more I could expand out and capture everything else that was happening and coming at me. And actually, the more beautiful it all became from a new perspective. So in 2020, also, I'm kind of on this ramp up of my awareness and empathy. I was really considering other people's positions, ashamedly to say, for some of the first time seriously in my life, just thinking about what limitations other people had. I've always enjoyed, I had periods when I was younger of really poor health and some bad asthma and some other stuff, but nothing too crazy, and was always able to kind of get through things and then power on and be what I wanted to be physically in the world, expressing that way. But so many others can't, and so many others have limitations or have challenges that prevent them. And having that perspective, and then digging deeper into what that meant historically at the human level, kind of collectively, how much there has been of trauma and pain that we've caused ourselves, each other as humans. I was thinking about things differently for the first time and having this awakening moment. And then I was introduced to psychedelic mushrooms in 2020 and had a guide that helped me through a psychedelic journey. And it wasn't the end of the growth. It wasn't the beginning, but it was a component of it. And in a lot of ways, I think it magnified certain elements of it. It brought a lot to my attention. And it did change me. And it was among the most powerful experiences that I would say I've had in my life. And I'm still learning from it. I'm still learning from it. And I think there's more that it could provide the more I kind of dig into it. So through that experience, I came out of that with trying to resolve like the reality that I'm in can be perceived differently than I currently am perceiving it. And that opens the possibilities to so much about reality that we don't know, that the sliver that what my senses can articulate of reality may just be a sliver of it. That if I think about like an amoeba, a single amoeba that's floating around in a drop of dew resting on a blade of grass in a suburban neighborhood, that what the reality is for that amoeba, what is of all the available information, what its senses are that's able to kind of characterize or reduce, because ultimately our brains are just reducing machines. We just reduce things. Filters, right. And what an amoeba is able to filter out of all the quantifiable pieces of information in its universe relative to what it can filter is just this enormous gap. And I don't have any reason to believe that our gap is any less small between what's possibly computational in all the information and what our senses and even our instrumentation and scientific machinery can kind of encircle. It's a sliver of what's possible.
I agree.
And go ahead. Did you?
I think also the purpose of being here is really that, be constricted somehow, and having this journey of awakening and understanding the limits of our mind, and that transcend that basically, and understand that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. But I agree with you. We are very limited with what we know. I really do believe that our brain is a filter that allows us to perceive the reality as we see it. Yeah. And if our brain was different, we would see the reality completely differently.
Yeah. I also agree with Carl Rogers, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically, I don't know that we live in a time and place anymore where we have the luxury of saying that there is a singular reality, of agreeing that there is a reality that we all must conform to or be subject to. And that speaks to the phenomenological idea of every person comes with their own perspective and is representing a frame of reference inside of this whole system, and is valuable in their frame, in their reference as an individual, uniquely part of the whole.
Yeah, this is so important to say, I guess, because how many people there are in the world? 8 billion? I don't know, something like that. And we will all have a slice of the truth or a unique point of view. So I don't think there are two people that will think or believe exactly the same, because we have come all from different experiences. We have all different filters. So we will experience reality all in a different way. So yeah, I think the goal is really learn how to communicate to each other and put the pieces of the puzzle all together to gather as much as the truth as possible. And
I love
try,
that.
yeah, and try to respect, yeah, all the others people view as well, because I think if really people know how the minds work, the subconscious and everything, and how the filters in your mind work as well, they will really realize that however you perceive the reality is just based on your past experiences and the filter that your brain put on, thanks to those. And so that's why we have all different views. And there is, just, yeah, we can put together the different parts of the truth.
Yeah. And, I think in particular, religions generally, especially in the West, are going through a period of transition and serious change right now. And I think what I've come to kind of reason through or arrive at, and I don't want to say arrive because I wanted to keep refining and getting higher resolution of clarity, but that religion is basically, it tries to encapsulate a spiritual moment in time, and it tries to hold on to that for as long as it can and tries to attract people to that. I think that there are people throughout time in our human family who have been able to glimpse light through, let's say, just the doorway of their own experience, where they turn around and they basically say, there it is, it's light, it's all one thing, and we're all a part of it. It's ultimately light. And those people, if there was a topographical map that represented the human family, and elevation was actually the proximity to the one source of truth and the one source of light, nobody ever touches it, but those among us that approach it, say like the Jesus Christ, the Muhammads, the Buddhas, the Carl Sagans, whoever these people are throughout time that stand as kind of monoliths among us in their time, monoliths, but zooming out, we see them as appearing as these like valleys in that topographical map where they're approaching that one source of light, and they're turning around, and as soon as they're saying, I've seen it, it's light, now it's being filtered through those that hear them and their universe and their frame of reference, and so it's refracted a little bit, and then they turn around and say, he's the guy that saw the light, or she's the woman that saw the light, and it becomes refracted at one more layer. It just continues like that. And religion is the best attempt we have with our technology and our current tools, or at least our past technology and our past tools, really, to try and freeze frame that moment or that vision or that experience that one of us had, so that we can all kind of like drink from it spiritually. But it's always a changing landscape, because all of the complexity that's emerging out of the possibilities mean that spirituality, that someone else has to go glimpse the light again. Someone else has to get there and turn around and say, I've seen it now in this current space, in this current unit, in kind of this milieu of human history. Because as soon as religion appears, it's the cicada shell. It's the cicada exoskeleton that the cicada, the magical creature, the spirituality actually flew out of. And what remains on the tree is the shell. And it has a semblance of the spirituality. And people can for themselves see the spirituality through that with their effort. But at the end of the day, they have to actually find the cicada to have it themselves, I think. Yeah. And yeah, those are some of the ways that I think about religion.
I like this explanation. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things that you said. And yeah, I totally agree about the pandemic, what you said. And it's a very sensitive subject, as you said, because for many it was very, very painful. But it was similar experience for me. So I really feeling blessed that I had that time in my life where I could just stay stuck at home and really look within and have time to study and listen to podcasts and taking courses, self-development courses, because it really, there is where I really awakened and understood, that I wasn't a victim, but I was a creator of my life. And as you said, another thing that I liked that you said, that it is a process. So there might be people that are listening to this that are in this process right now, and maybe they're not at the level of awakening that makes them understand really that they are a creator yet. But as you said, it is a process, and it can start much earlier than what we think. So I say the pandemic changed my life, but actually, even just, I'm from Italy, so just moving to London, moving to another country where the language is different, is a multicultural city, that really started to open my mind and change my belief system, because I could see things that were completely different from what I was used to. And that really changes a lot in you. They always say, travel or live abroad and it will open your mind. And for me, it was really true. I didn't have any clue about manifestation, energy, or even meditation, but just the fact to, have moved there really, really helped me to open my mind. And then another thing, and I think was for you similar with your illness, that really challenges in life are what really help you awaken, is what put you on the right track. In fact, even for me, when I had a lot of issues breaking up with partners, moving houses, jobs, and everything together, I wanted to find a way to find balance within me again. So I went to therapy and started meditation, and the process carried on. So yeah, I really like what you said, that it is a process and you didn't know where to start with your story, because it's true. And as I said before, I think is really why we are here. Is kind of the game, right? We come here, we forget where we come from and how the reality works, and then little by little we remember, and we become creators again.
Back together I like that, to be creators. And so I don't know exactly in the story, I guess it's important to know that after the mushroom experience that I was healed from the most severe of the symptoms and the most severe of the illnesses that I had in my physical body.
Did you do it for that reason? Because you knew it
I was not
help?
expecting that.
Okay.
I was not expecting that. The reasons that I underwent that journey were, I think maybe part of it was wondering what would it do, but I wasn't expecting it to heal it. And I say heal it, I mean, I could just be in remission from those things that could return at any moment. But since then, they've never been nearly severe. For all intents and purposes, I've been able to take my life back in that physical space, at least. So that was kind of a big surprise. And I don't suggest that mushrooms are a way for people to heal autoimmune conditions. I'm not going to say they can't, because they did for me, but this is my experience. So I don't make recommendations about eating mushrooms or taking anything to heal a specific situation. For me, I stopped believing all the doctrine as literal. But what I did was all of the other religions and all of the other ideas that are a part of humanity kind of all fit in the same bucket now to me. So I can read from the Bhagavad Gita, or I can read from the Quran, or I could read from the Book of Mormon, and there's archetypal value. There are things that can have meaning for me, things that Jesus Christ said that I still hold on to as valuable, even though I don't see him as the way that the church describes him being. I see him from a different perspective now. And that story from the Garden of Eden, I think we've gotten all wrong, especially in the West, which is to interpret it as this God who came in to separate us from this garden. And he did that by telling us that we're dominators. Like the role of humans as dominators on this earth is not leading us outcome currently. But if we're co-creators and if we're part of it, if we're gardeners of the earth rather than dominators of it. And, that I expect some to think of that as just like a platitude, but it's something I'm still trying to figure out for myself, what it means to be a gardener of the earth instead of a dominator of it. Because during the pandemic, there was, I think, a return of nature in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And I think we all witness that at different levels. And it's exciting to me to think about what that could look like if we tried intentionally to, help that process.
One of my greatest teacher, Matthias De Stefano, I don't know if you know him, but describe us as humans. So describe the whole planet as a unique organism, and every species, plants and everything, we all are part of this organism. And he describes humans as the neurons of the planet. So we are nature, we are the planet, we are the neurons of this planet. And so I think we totally forgot that, and we saw ourselves as separate as Mother Earth, but we're actually part of it. And so I think, as you said, now more and more people are starting to remember that and still started to feel part of it again. And I think our job is really to communicate to each other. And I don't know if this planet is meant to have total peace, but definitely we can create some balance and harmony that hasn't been here for a long time.
Yeah, I love that. I think of that organism as well. It's all the fractal nature of reality, where small things are depictions of larger things, and it's like a Russian nesting doll. It kind of all fits together inside of itself. As it unfolds, you can see more definition, but it can also just all be viewed as one thing ultimately. Because I think it's our language that created words that make the distinction. And I think I'm so happy that I had this awakening experience. There's a lot of pain and there's a lot of difficulty. I share this story. I think so far it sounded mostly like a story of a very positive story. And that's because I view it as that, but it had so much negative to it. Losing a lot of my community, losing friends, losing things that you lose when you leave a religion that is so tied up in every aspect of your life. There's still challenges within my family that are just really hard to reconcile and hard to know how to make the best and move forward. And so it comes at a cost, but it's a cost that I think I would pay again, because I wouldn't change it. What my dad did in his mid-30s to find the answers that gave him that propulsion forward in life, and me finding my way out of it, are the same thing in my mind. They're directionally different, but that's not the important part. That's all context, and in different universes anyway, from different inertial frames of reference. So like, I view him as doing exactly what he was supposed to do. And I view me now with as much fervor and as much like belief that I was on the right path when I was in that system doing that missionary work. I have that now again in this new direction of helping people through different means.
Thanks for sharing that as well. I often ask to people that come here to talk about their story, what was the most difficult part and how their family and friends took it, because that's something I think the majority of people have in common when they awaken, is that they there is some friction, especially with family members or the friends that you always had. If you don't have the same experience, it's really difficult to understand what you're going through. So yeah, people will I'm sure they thought I was crazy at some point. But yeah, it's part of the journey, and I feel is impossible to go back. So even if you will like maybe consciously to keep those friends and keep the harmony in your family, it's just impossible to go back to your old belief when you actually see things in a different way.
It becomes something new.
Yeah.
It's the realization that destruction precedes creation for me was important. Like that the seed has to be broken up, destroyed for the rest of the plant to emerge out of it. Destruction precedes creation. And so it was a dismantling, a deconstruction of that lens that I look at my world through and experience reality through. It was a deconstruction of that. And then there's been this reconstruction that's followed that I could never have imagined, the richness of it, the bounty of it that I found. And it's, for me, this is the most important part of it, that there is, after leaving something like that, there is, I think, great hope for like even more than what you had before. In terms of a richness to life and a fullness to it. And with Mormonism in particular, a lot of what I see online and what I see in communities is there's a place where people can arrive where there's just a lot of anger. And I think anger is an important emotion. And I think it's better in a lot of ways than just being depressed. But depression's important too. And I don't, these emotions are real and valid, and anybody experiencing them that's their experience. I think that's important for them to be aware of and to hold and to share. But getting beyond that into a place of more healing is really what I'm interested in trying to affect. Like, there are people who just have left the church and see it all as that they've been tricked and that they've been conned by it, and that there's a place of anger. And maybe there's a lot of ways to just vent that anger online. And maybe there's a lot of catharsis to doing that could be valuable in the healing process. But I also think reframing what the church tried to control its narrative of its history for so long until the internet came out with all of this other information that changed what it's like. Well, Joseph Smith was a very different character than what the church said that he was when you look at all the other data. And I think it's possible to look at all of that other data and still see something of value in what he did as a human, and that he was a complicated three-dimensional person who certainly had altered states of consciousness coming and going, whether endogenous or exogenous. He was seeing or feeling things in his reality that he was putting out there into the world. So I think there's ways to view it all that really can bring closure and healing.
And I think this could be done for any religion. And when you awaken in this way, I think you start to see what all religions have in common more than what separates one from the other, because I think there is some truth in all of them, and then got distorted along the way. But I'm sure the work that you are doing will help many people, because I also understand the anger and the frustration and how people can feel lost when they have been told all their life that things are in a certain way, and they discover that absolutely not true what they've been taught. So I understand it's hard for them, but hopefully they, even with your help, they can find some different answers to that. I wanted to ask you, just because I'm curious, I don't know if you can explain with words, because I know it's very difficult, but in your psychedelic experience, so was just one experience that heals you, or you had to do multiple? And also, if you can explain what you saw or felt, or I know it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I did take the mushrooms just the one time in 2020, and that was, I mean, from that time I've been healed of my most extreme symptoms that were limiting me with these autoimmune conditions. And so, and I say like, well, I'm still learning from that, because maybe there's a time where I encounter it again and I'm okay if that happens. It's kind of I'll let it happen, because it unfolded for me in such a way. It was the next step. It was the obvious next step for me in my own journey. It wasn't forced. I didn't even seek it out. It came to me. The opportunity came to me. So I think of it as like, yeah, the mushrooms were ready for me. So if they're ever ready for me again, I'll be ready. But it is an ineffable experience. I realize there's dose and like set and setting considerations. And I would say that if anybody has any interest in that kind of experience, just become aware of those things. In a lot of ways, I wasn't aware of much at all about it. It hadn't entered in 2020. It was still kind of hitting the milieu of the zeitgeist of kind of mainstream. Now we could pick up magazines and there's articles about it. But I mean, and I think that's kind of always been the case with mushrooms, is they lay low. This is how they work in nature. They lay low underground, doing their thing, making all the connections and basically holding up nature as this fungal network. And then as I understand them, when it's time to release their spores, that's when the mushroom emerges. And it's actually a really small segment of its life cycle when it's popping out. But they're doing all this work, eating all this, turning over all of this organic material inside of like a dead tree that falls in the forest. And it's the fungus stuff that starts working really early, as I understand it. So these mushrooms emerge out when it's time, when something's died or when something's being changed over. And I think in our society on that fractal level, I think they operate in the same way, like their archetypal changes, where it's like nature picking man up, and then in the future man will pick nature up, and then nature picks man up, and just like the masculine and feminine circle. So we're in that stage where nature's picking man up, hopefully. And so for me, it was an ineffable experience. It's like I definitely glimpsed the oneness. I created a drawing in that journey that I have with me that I really value, because I do art, but I'm not really like a good artist. I just make art and I try to express like mental images or unconscious things that I try to bring into my consciousness and try to express that. So a lot of abstract art, but I did something while I was in the mushroom journey on a piece of paper with markers and pencils. And it was a great experience, because for me, it felt like I was tracing what I was doing. It wasn't, and I talked to other people since who've had a similar experience, where they said it felt like tracing. I was seeing the image on the paper and just using the pencil to outline it. And there was this kind of this assuring voice basically in my head that was like, you're doing it. You just start doing it. It's already perfect. Just start drawing. Because I couldn't decide what to draw for a long time. I couldn't. It's like, am I even coherent enough to draw something? But I was, and I drew this, and so I have it now, and it's definitely meaningful to me. And I took other things out of that journey with me, things like repairing some relationships with family members that I was holding back. They were on the other side of a door that I was holding the door shut, and that I just need to open the door to them. And I've read literature now. A lot of people who have these types of experience can find similar things, healing past relationships, connecting more to the oneness that we have with nature and with everything.
Yeah.
And so it was profound. And yeah, I think when talking about these kind of journeys, because I do think psychedelics are going to be an important ingredient in the future of our development as a human species. And I think that in a lot of ways they have a healing potential. And in a lot of ways they have a potential to address the biggest crises that we face. And it's always, for me, it's a little bit of a balance of like, I don't know how much expectation should be out there about what a mushroom journey should be like, when I can't say what someone's individual experience, what it could potentially bring. But I do feel like if you have these two kind of prongs of, or three maybe, there's like a recreational aspect to some of these substances. There's a medical, or like one that's very materialist, one that's very much, we need to figure out the dose, we need to figure out exactly how it's going to work inside of a pill so that maybe a pharmaceutical company can make billions off of reproducing some synthetic derivative, something, and then there's this third prong, I would say, which is like, these things are a part of us. And if we kind of get into that shaman relationship with guides and with people who've been there, but they're not going to tell us what the territory is, but they're going to point us in the direction. It's the closest thing I had to kind of that rite of passage, where in ancient cultures, when a young man hit puberty, and the village elders would basically kidnap him out of his bed and throw him in a cave for 3 days, or take him, outside of the village, and he had to find his way back. Those kinds of formative experiences that separated the individual from the tribe and saw what that person was made of as they became a man. That experience was the closest thing, one of the closest. I guess there may be others, but that was definitely one of those like experiences where it was my rite of passage of like eliminating myself out of this equation. People talk about a deep enough psychedelic experience. Chris Beisch talks about dying repeatedly in his in his book.
But I agree with you that is different for everyone.
Different for everyone.
Yeah, mine is different, and I heard people that similar experience to you, but some other had also more difficult journeys through it. So yeah, it's true, and I hope that the more information will come out, the more people will, get informed and know that actually, they will never know until they try what they can experience.
I think there's value in all three of those prongs, of the recreational, the pharmaceutical, and the shamanic approach. And I think that for me, it was the third. It really was. Like in Mormonism, every week on Sunday, we take this sacrament bread to remind us of the body of Christ and his sacrifice. And it was like that for me. It was the bread of mystery and the bread of life, and something that's going to connect me. And I think that as we approach these substances that are psychedelic with that kind of reverence, I mean, we've definitely mishandled it from the perspective of war on drugs and what the powers that be have kind of controlled as far as a narrative of what these are and where they came from and what they can do. I think most people are probably in agreement at this point that we've mishandled that. But if we can get beyond that stuff, and if we can approach it in that shamanic reverence as like a sacred thing, I think the potential for vast change is in it. It's like we've killed God in terms of the religions of old, but there's still a way to glimpse that capital T truth, and you can call it God if you want. There's just a lot of connotation with that word. I still I would say I believe in God 100%, because we are it. It's all of us. It's all one thing. It's the creation. It's the mystery. It's the energy that drives it. It's all of it. So, it's semantics at some level, and psychedelics have the potential for us to glimpse that light and the new kind of spiritual phenomenon. It's like spirituality emerges at the border of what we know about our reality and what could be. It's like death, obviously, is one of those places. That's where the spirituality can emerge. And if we're pushing our universe of the material world, the science, so far, it goes way past the language that these major religions of the world came up in. They've got to evolve to fit within that expanding universe that science, because science is a new element of us. relatively new element of humans. And so now we've got these like this sphere of science being pushed out in all these directions, from discovering what's in the Mariana Trench to discovering what happened at the birth of the universe through telescopes. I think those proportionately push out. And then you've got to have in order for spirituality to occur, the religion or the approaches of religion have to be expanded to like that outer limit as well. So in other words, I think psychedelics are a way to integrate where science pushes and where religion pushes into that edge where spirituality emerges.
Mm. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned you worked in the financial services for a long time, and I know you recently changed, and I wanted to ask you a similar story to me. I was in the financial services for 10 years, and then after the pandemic, I said, I just cannot do it anymore. And I realized what my calling was as well. So I wanted to know a bit about that. So after these experiences, how was for you, like realizing what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, without the kind of identity that I had built for myself, that was basically, I don't want to say erased, but it was transformed. This identity of myself through the Mormon lens and through my upbringing, through I was to that point, it became clear that there was parts of me that I was not answering to. There was parts of me that had been stifled or that were being, I guess, held back. And there's a wonderful book that I would recommend by Dr. James Hollis, and it's called The Middle Passage: From Misery to Meaning. I keep it nearby on my bookshelf. And it's not that long of a book, but Dr. Hollis, who's a Jungian psychologist, and he's written prolifically about like midlife and about what can happen as people change and reorient themselves. And that's to me is a treasure of a book that I came across. It was like a step on my journey. It was part of the golden thread, I call it, that led me out of the labyrinth, which is I'm entered into a new labyrinth. There's no end to the labyrinths, but at least you can get out of some of them. So, but this middle passage, From Misery to Meaning, this book gave me a lot of insight into what I am as a person, an unconscious aspect of me. A lot of what Jung talks about really resonated with me. These and you can look at it with these constituent parts of an id and an ego and a superego, like Freud talked about. There's a lot of ways that I started looking at myself, and not that they're capital T true, but that that it's a language that can provide some understanding and some insight. And using all of those languages to look into myself, it became clear that in order to individuate further, in order to be kind of what I feel I am, I needed to make that change in my occupation. And it was with a lot of care, with a lot of consideration, and after a lot of conversation between my wife and I as well, because, we're obviously very much intertwined with our life and connected as one, and as close to one as we can be in these kinds of things. And so it was after about 16 years in the industry where I had built, I think, a career that I'm very proud of, a career that got me to places and to meet with wonderful people and to work with wonderful people and to learn a lot of interesting things and to be excited and to be super motivated. And it did so much good for me. It's another one of those things where I wouldn't change it at all looking back. But I did leave that industry just a few months ago. I've started in a program of study, and my goal really is to be able to just help people navigate either their kind of middle passage, which we have in our society, this midlife crisis term. It's really not a crisis if it doesn't have to be. And that's one thing Dr. Hollis describes as a middle passage. It's actually from one life to the next. It's from the provisional life into the life of the self.
Mm-hmm.
We're given a life when we're born, and unless that life dies, we never actually get to be the self. And Jesus talked about this: you must be born again. And Nicodemus was like, "Do you mean I go back into my mother's womb and come out?" He's like, "No, it's not that. It's that this provisional life of who you are and everything that you came up with, that for those parts of it that aren't representative of you or actually true to you or in where you are then in that present now, in the present now, that must die in something else. The creation is preceded by the destruction." So I left financial services, and it's, I'm not going to say never about going back or anything like that, because things could change, and I have learned a lot and have a lot of experience. But for me, for now, it feels like I'm on that trajectory that is answering the call of the self that was underneath there kind of scratching. And for me, it was underneath there scratching so much and so long that it eventually was like, okay, we're going to make the body, he'll listen to the body. And so it came up through that. And so it was all about being out of alignment and being more aligned. And I'm not going to say I'm aligned now or I'm congruent or that I'm, balanced, but more so approaching those things. And I had to do that, had to have that other life of part of me die to get to move in that direction toward more alignment.
Yeah, I'm sure you're definitely more aligned now. I was speaking to a very famous coach in Italy in my podcast a few weeks ago, and she described she compared coaches to shamans of the tribes, and she was saying that in the past, in these tribes, there were some people that were called to become shamans, but if they weren't answering the calling, they were getting sick, and that was helping them then awake and answering the calling. And often happens with us, as you just mentioned. And even in my case, for example, I broke my teeth, I had back pain, and I was getting progressively more sick until the pandemic arrived, and actually sat down with myself and said, okay, analyze who I was, what I was good at, what I wanted to do with my life. So I think is very similar. I don't know if you want to do coaching, but it seems like similar field, what you want to do. So I think it was really your calling. And it often happens that people get sick, and can be physical, or also depression can be. And people awaken after that. Hopefully not everyone answered their calls though.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I really resonate with that idea. It's like I look at the individual often in the fractal lens of the whole collective, the human family, and it's like the part of me, I don't pretend to be a biologist, but like the part of me that is that attacks the cells that aren't healthy, the cleanup crew, the part that takes the immune system, the part of the body that is focused on healing the body. There's part of the body that's focused on doing the functions of the body and all of that, but there's a part of it that it's reserved to heal. And I think as a human family, we have those parts of us. I can feel that happening as it's like calling those of us that have that have that in us, I think. And it doesn't have to be everybody. It's not like everybody needs to eat mushrooms and awaken. I don't believe that. I think it is a portion of us that responds to a call to help to heal others, because there's a lot that needs to be healed. And I think it's done through communication, as you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you one last question, and then I'll leave you with some other things maybe that you want to add or want to share. But so it can be a big question, but what do you feel is your calling? What do you want to leave in this world? What's your legacy? What's your desire so far?
I think my frame of reference as a father, as a husband, as a part of a community and society and all of that changed in this awakening process, and not entirely, but a lot of it did. And I think of like my children, my goal as a parent, as a father, is to love them, to guide them, and let them be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that could mean a lot of different possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of where I like to keep. That's my mantra for being a father. That's what I keep reminding myself in the moments. That's what hopefully the long game for me as a father is. And there's obviously detail below that mantra that fills in the gaps, but it is, if I do that, then to me, I'll be a successful father. And hopefully that doesn't even matter. My perspective of me as a father is not as important as their perspective of me as a father, because that's what the relationship to them is me, so as their father. So anyway, I really hope that obviously my kids get to be healthy and grow and enjoy the world and have challenge and face defeat and face victory. And if that's the legacy, I think that is the most important legacy, is just pushing on genetically and just continuing to experience this whole thing, because through them we're all one. My dad passed away in 2018, and I feel like he's still, it's not that it's like this. I think of reincarnation, but the part of me that used to get excited about the possibility of reincarnation is not the part of me that gets reincarnated. The ego isn't the thing that gets to live again. So I want to help people. I want to be productive to a community. There's a lot of communities that are in need, and I don't know exactly what that looks like through my studies and through my own continuing to build process. It could be younger people. It could be middle life people. I'm not even sure exactly what it will look like, but it's unfolding now. And right now it's a podcast that I co-host with a good friend of mine, someone that that I'm really proud of what we're putting out there. And hopefully it's something that's of value for people. So it's a slow process, or maybe not. It's just kind of out of my hands right now. I'm following the thread.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do, following the sign and the flow. And I think many of us that are called to do this work, who we will help is usually our old self, all the people that are, in similar situation as we were, because we went through certain things for a reason, I believe. So we know how it feels, so we can help guiding others through the same through the same journey, even if of course there will always be differences. And another thing that I know, people born in the 80s or 90s, I think you're one of them too.
Good guess, yes.
Yeah. Are we have this, they call it, other teachers that I follow, they call them the cleanup crew. So we came here really to clean all these unhealthy patterns that come down from generation to generation, so we can really help our kids, as you said, or future generations. Even if you don't have kids, you can still coach someone that has kids and have an impact in that way. Really not having to, go through everything that we went through, so they can start with their mission much earlier, and they don't have to spend the first 30 years maybe healing from trauma. I think we all have this similar calling, and we help people that were in similar situation as we were years ago.
Yeah, I'm definitely drawn to that idea of helping those that are coming out of high demand religions, or coming out of systems or frameworks that were, limiting for much of their life. Or I think that there's not going to be a shortage of that in the years to come, as kind of new knowledge, new the psychedelic realm being mapped out. I mean, it's like, it reminds me of the Truman Show, when the teacher pulls down the map and she's like, all the world's already been explored, because Truman wants to be an explorer, you know. And she's like, hey, you were born at a time and a place where it's already all explored. Well, not so. There's obviously more to explore on our planet itself and beyond, but I think also the other dimensions where complexity has continued to expand possibility out of simplicity, and the psychedelic plane realm, whatever you want to call it, is something like that. And there's a lot that's going on into the process of mapping that, and how it can help us as humans navigate the 3D world. So yeah, I kind of want to find myself at the confluence of those things. And if the universe kind of lines that up, that could be great. But I'm also open to what else could be. And, you know, hopefully maybe in years to come, if I can get back on your show, Valerie, I'll give you an update.
Yeah, for sure. I feel we will keep connected. Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And any final word of wisdom, anything else that you want to share, maybe to people that are going through some difficult times or illness or whatever?
Yeah. I can't, I'm still in this process of learning what I don't know about myself. And there is a universe inside of us. I find the Hermetic principles in the Kabbalion to be really valuable. One of those is correspondence, as above, so below, which is to say that there's reflection, or there's a correspondence between what's outside and what's inside. And I do think that there's a universe inside of us that for myself, that means that I can understand myself more clearly as I'm introspective, and that if I try to develop empathic qualities, and when I think of myself as a collective, one thing that I see happening is this debate, this dichotomy, where people who leave religion fall into what I see as a trap, which is, now I'm a scientist, materialist, religion is bad, science is good kind of mindset, which is just a new labyrinth. It's just another cave. If we can use Plato's cave, right? If you escape out of one, you're in another. I don't think there's an end to those caves, but I do think that it's possible to integrate what you experienced into what is real and what's actual. And that for me, that means that I could say, if I live another 35 years, then it was 35-ish years inside of this particular space and system of belief and religious dogma, and 35 years without it. And if I could look back on a life like that, in a lot of ways, I would say I'm the luckiest guy that ever lived, because it's like the two different eyes you have that give you two different perspectives, that give you 3D sight. It allows me, I hope, to be able to, look at something from those different perspectives, and to be able to see more of the complexity of it all. So I don't really want to get lost in the weeds here. I just want, I guess, to impress anybody listening upon their mind that there is, if you're in that place of like, I'm leaving this church and it hurt me and it damaged me, and now I've got to do all of this healing. Well, that is true for you. That is true for your process, and that could mean a lot of different things. I just hope that there's a hope underneath there, that it can actually be integrated to where it can be, that your history, that your life narrative can be one of wholeness, and that it can be viewed as just the way that it was supposed to be. Because I think that's what we're really, like, the hardest thing about life is the expectations we have of it in a lot of ways. And there is a way to get out of that trap of religion bad, materialism good, and being in this argument, which what happens is emerging out of that comes the argument that if you don't have religion, you don't have a moral ground, which I think is it's a semantics. It's a problem with language, and it seems to shut down the conversation to assume that someone without a religious background doesn't have a moral ground is I don't think it's a healthy assumption to make, because the morality can emerge out of the oneness. In other words, if I'm part of you and you're part of me, then if I hurt you, I'm hurting me. And that morality of oneness is what the religions are all trying to aim for. So religion is not fundamental. Spirituality and really consciousness is, I think, fundamental and the bottom layer, and everything else emerges out from there. And, you know, there's still a lot to understand about that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story with me and my audience. Hopefully we will do another episode at some point so you can update us with, you know, everything that you're doing for people and the world. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and I'll see you at the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.